Today, we're talking about all things wheel fitment related on the 3rd gen Lexus IS. This will include the JDM Scat Pack. No one's ever called it that before, but it's the IS 500. We've also covered the 2IS in a previous video, which has similar wheel fitment. However, the 3IS, like basically everything, has gotten larger and larger over the generations. And as such, it's only right if we cover this generation on its own. This guide is going to go into detail about wheels, tires, and suspension setups for the XE30 platform, better known as the 3rd gen Lexus IS or 3IS, model years ranging from 2014 to present. Holidays are coming up. You need a gift for the car enthusiast in your life. These mini wheels are super sick. They're available at the link down in the description below. Also, this entire fitment guide linked down below as well. Now basics: bolt pattern 5114, lug thread M12 or M14x1.5, center bore 60.1 millimeters, and the lug torque is 100 foot-pounds. The 2020 facelift switched from a M12 to an M14 lug nut and stud. Otherwise, the fitment remains the same. The big decision is always what size wheels to get, and for most of you watching this video, 19s are the best option. They fill out the wheel wells well, but they still leave room for a 35 or 40 sidewall tire. Now, if you want to step up or down, 18s and 20s are also possible and can look good on the right applications. For width and offset, the majority of aftermarket wheels will run between 8.5 to 9.5 for width, offsets around plus 35. The catch here, and there's always a catch, is that wheels 9.5 and wider do have a hard time clearing the front suspension, leading to staggered setups being commonplace on this platform. You can go pretty much as wide as you want in the rear without having to worry about suspension clearance. The IS does have small fenders though, it's not a 350Z. Now, yes, you can use staggered wheels on all-wheel drive ISs, but the rolling diameter needs to be within 2% front to rear. Rolling diameter refers to the overall diameter of the tires. You can play with offset, width, tire specs, wheel color, whatever else, as long as the final diameter of the tire comes within a 2% difference front to rear. Popular combinations: 225/40 front and 255/35 in the rear. This falls well within the tolerance. Now, let's get into looking at some cars. This first one is on ROHANA RFX 11s, 19x8.5 and 19x9.5 with the 35 and 40 offset respectively. Tires come in at a 225/35 and a 265/30. This one is lowered on F-Sport suspension, which we count as a factory lowering spring. This is possibly the most common and popular setup on this chassis: 19.8.5 front, 19.9.5 rear. It's a tried and true setup, having been done thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and if you don't believe me, look at our gallery. The fitment looks a whole lot better than stock, yet rubbing will not be an issue as it's not that tight. This is an IS 300 F Sport, so it does come with factory lowering springs. Regardless of your suspension type though, stock, lowered, coilovers, whatever you want to do, you won't have rubbing issues if you copy these specs. If you want a bolt-on setup for your IS, just stop watching here, but don't stop watching here. Now, FERRADA FR2s, 19.8.5/35, 9.5/40. Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires, 235/40/19, 265/30/19. Lower on RSR down springs, no rubbing. Now, as I said to begin with, the IS 500 shares fitment with the lower trims, with brake clearance being the issue. This 500 is rocking more or less the same fitment as the last, only with slight tweaks to the tire size, and guess what? It fits just as well. Rather than F-Sport suspension, this car is on RSR down lowering springs, giving us around a 1.5 inch drop. And just like the one before, there are no issues with rubbing. If you're looking to pick up a set of lowering springs for your IS, RSR makes some pretty awesome stuff for this platform. We also carry IBOC, H&R, KW, whatever you want. You want to lower your car on a budget, springs are the way to do it. Now, next up, we've got ADVAN GTs, like this mini one right here, 18.9+35 all around. This is an all-wheel drive IS 300 lowered on BC Racing VR coilovers. And for something a little bit different, you could go for a square setup like we see on this 2016 IS 300 all-wheel drive. This isn't completely square as the tires are staggered. You have a 225/40 in the front and a 255/35 in the rear, but this will still work on all-wheel drive applications. Also bear in mind these are 18s instead of 19s, definitely a noticeable difference. Whether it looks better or not is up to you. Personally, 19s look better on this chassis. If you want to go this low, you'll need coilovers. BC Racing VRs were used on this application. If for some reason this isn't low enough for you, BC makes an extreme low option. We're going to link both in the guide and down in the description. BC makes a great coilover. They're Florida locals here. They ship anywhere in the country, and we've got the best prices on them. Bessemer ESR RF2s, 8.5/30, 9.5/35. This one is lowered on springs. There's no rubbing. Going a little bit lower with the offset will get you closer to a flush fitment, but you do potentially run into rubbing issues if you go lower. If you choose wider tires as well, you could run into rubbing issues. This one's on thinner tires, so the fitment is doable without any extra modification. After all, it is only a quarter inch or so more aggressive than the typical plus 35 and plus 40 offsets. If you're thinking all of these wheels are out of my budget, well, guess what? ESR makes some super sick looking, affordable wheels that also come in great specs for these cars. These are the RF2, which is a rotary forged wheel that's a great looking split 5-spoke with some concavity to it. Want something with some dish instead? Well, they've got the AP8, the CS15, the CS11, which I got right here, and these come with dish instead of concavity. Now next up, VOSSEN VFS1, 20x9 plus 38, 20x10.5 plus 45, wrapped up in Lionheart, LH5, 225/30 and 255/30 tires. Lowered again on RSR, super down springs, no rubbing. We saw 18s, but will 20s fit in your 3IS? Yeah, they will, and they look pretty good on the right applications. Now here's what a set of 20-inch VOSSEN wheels look like on a 2015 IS 350F Sport. The front fitment is pretty standard, while a 10.5 out back gives it a great wide look. Back spacing is not a concern in the rear. However, if you're looking at 20s, lowering is a necessity to have your car not look like a donk. This one is on RSR super down springs, which give you about a 2-inch drop. With this setup, there is zero rubbing, probably down to having super thin tires with a slight stretch. Now, you knew they were coming. VOLK Racing TE37 Ultra M spec, square setup, 19.9.5 plus 28 all around. Falcon Azenis 235/40/19 and 255/35/19 tires, RSR Active Eye coilovers. Some slight rubbing in the rear due to the aggressive offset. This is a 23 IS 500 and it's rocking aggressive square fitment on coilovers. As we've seen with higher offset wheels, you might have to remove some of the natural camber to avoid interference with the front suspension. With the offsets seen here, the plus 28, the fitment is more or less spot on without any suspension adjustment needed. This one is on RSR I active coilovers, which retain the factory AVS and DDS. No other mods were needed. Now we're getting into the ones for the stancy boys. We got one on air, Work in Motion, CR Kiwami, an 18.9.5 plus 30 offset, including that 8mm spacer. Kumho Exta PS91 tires, 215/35/18 all around. This one is, as I said earlier, bagged on airless performance. Camber was adjusted on the factory suspension arms. There's no rubbing when it's aired up. Obviously, don't drive your bagged car aired down. If the other ones we talked about aren't low enough, you could go with air suspension. This 2019 IS 300 is riding on a kit from Airless Performance. Combine that with some 18-inch Work in Motions, and this car is absolutely dumped when it's aired out. The specs here are pretty standard, even with that 8mm spacer. And believe it or not, the natural camber from lowering this car makes the fit perfect when it is aired out. And of course, lets it drive like normal when aired up, which is kind of the entire point of air suspension. If you're looking for more inspiration for an air suspension build, check out our 2IS guide. We have a whole bunch of them over there. Once you get into the stance fitments, the lines get a little bit blurrier, right? So let's wrap it all back up. If you want the tried and true fitment, staggered set of 19-inch wheels, 8.5 or 9 out front, 9.5 or 10 out back, 35-ish offset all around. These specs will suit cars at stock height, lowered on springs, lowered on coilovers, basically whatever you want to do with your IS. If you want to run a 9.5 in front, you do have to be careful of the back spacing as the wheels will come close to that front suspension. This might require some spacers or alignment to make it work. That's why we recommend just stay away from them. Sizing up to a 20 or down to an 18 can look good depending on the ride height of your car and your ultimate goals with it. However, 19s are generally just the way to go here. It's one of those cars where there's like a right size, like a WRX. If you want to see more examples, head over to our vehicle gallery. We have a ton of ISs in there. Once you nail the fitment on your IS, take some photos and upload them to help fellow 3IS owners with their builds. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you liked the new studio background. By the way, we moved to Florida and I'll see you in the next one.